Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to see 142 of you and counting this morning. What a great tribute early on a Wednesday morning to our guest, Saeb Erakat. Let me say a few words about Saeb, and then I want to acknowledge some special guests, and then we'll interview Saeb for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions. As you all know, Saeb Erakat has been for a very long time the chief Palestinian negotiator and the head of the negotiations department of the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. I think Saeb is probably speaking to us from El Riha, from Jericho this morning, his hometown. He was born in Jerusalem, but he's been living in El Riha for a long time. He's had an extraordinary career. We can learn a lot from him. From everything that he's done. He has been at the center of every significant Israeli-Palestinian negotiation over many, many decades. He was at Madrid all the way back in 1991. He was at the Washington talks in 1992. He was at Camp David in 2000 with President Clinton in that near miss of a result. He was at Taba in 2001. He has been at every negotiation since. He's also been an official, a cabinet official of the Palestinian Authority he was head of Central Elections Commission, and he was Minister of Local Government from 1994 till 2003. He is a professor of political science at An-Najah University in Nablus. I visited Nablus just a couple of months ago. He has a BA and MA from the University of San Francisco over on the left coast. So he knows the United States very well and has a PhD from Bradford University. He's the author of 14 books. What an extraordinary career and background. Saeb, I met Saeb way back in 1985 when I was based in East Jerusalem, living in Sheikh Jarrah with my wife and kids. And I was coordinating American economic assistance on the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and I got to know this very young, very bright, very impressive Palestinian leader in Jericho. It's great to have Saeb with us. You'll hear a lot from him today. Let me just welcome some special guests. Professor Tarek Masoud is here. Professor Masoud is, of course, the chair of the Middle East Initiative at the Harvard Kennedy School. He is our foremost expert on the Middle East, and Tarek, my friend, will be asking some of the questions involved in this discussion. I want to welcome Professor Bob Mnookin and Professor Jim Sebanius. The three of us are co-teaching nearly 100 students in negotiations and diplomacy. Welcome to all those students. Welcome to the Great Powers students. Welcome to Professor Megan O'Sullivan and her students. And I, of course, want to welcome Professor Carl Kaiser, our very distinguished friend. Rob Dineen is here. Rob is one of the American great experts on the Middle East and on the Palestinian-Israeli issue. Rob and I worked together in government many times. He was a lead official in the George W. Bush administration on these issues. He's been involved in all sorts of Track 2 efforts with Tony Blair. And Rob has been leading at the Harvard Kennedy School our attempt to engage our Palestinian, Israeli, and other students on the Middle East negotiations. And Rob has been running seminars for us for several years, and we appreciate that. Alvaro Renato is here. He's all the way from Andalusia. He's on the screen in Spain. He's been our fellow this year. Alvaro, welcome. Laith Arafat is here. Laith graduated as a mid-career student in 2016. He's from Al-Quds University. And we're very pleased that Laith is back and look forward to hearing from him. And finally, but not least, my friend Lubna Igbaria is here. Many of you in the Harvard community may not know Lubna, but she is an Israeli Arab. Grew up as a fluent speaker of Arabic. She's Palestinian, but also of Hebrew. Lubna is now the executive director of Our Generation Speaks. Our Generation Speaks is an organization, Boston-based, which tries to develop cooperation between young Palestinians and young Israelis, tries to bring them together in joint business ventures, when that's possible. I have the great pleasure to chair the board, and I'm working closely with Lubna, and I really hope we can bring Lubna into this conversation because she really understands this division because she's lived it her entire life. So that's the introduction. Saeb, we're so pleased to see you. Thank you for being with us all the way from Jericho. I have a couple of questions. I know Tarek will as well. I just want to start, Saeb, before we get into talking about the negotiations and the frustrations that you and I know even some Israelis have about the lack of peace. What's it been like over the last couple of months as the pandemic has hit the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza, where so many Palestinians live? So many Palestinians live in crowded, dense conditions, particularly in Gaza, but also the refugee camps of the West Bank. How have you been coping, and how is the Palestinian Authority looking at this pandemic? And welcome.
Thank you very much for such an introduction, and so good to see you. You're looking very, very well. And to all the colleagues you mentioned, I'm honored to be amongst you. I'm speaking from that place where I was raised since childhood. You know, as far as Corona is concerned, is the first infection we had in Palestine was on March 5th. We had 4 people infected from some Italian and Greek tourists, actually. And you know, in Jericho, we had prepared, because I live here, we had prepared a quarantine center for those who come from outside early on. And then you can't believe it, Nick. On March 5th, we had a meeting, and then we decided to declare a state of emergency immediately with no hesitation. 2 hours later, President Abbas signed on a declaration of emergency, which quarantined the governor of Bethlehem, which prevented movement between the governorates, between Jericho and Nablus and Tulkarim and Jerusalem and Bethlehem and so on. And then a week later, the number went up to 15 persons, and we closed the schools and the universities and the kindergartens and the factories, and stopped all soccer games and sports, and we shut factories, we shut everything. And then on the 20th day, we imposed a house quarantine. We have a significant white army of doctors, nurses, lab experts, and so on. And we're so lucky to have all of this. And some of them are doing, you know, and behind the human capabilities, what they're doing. And then we have, you know, a lot of security restrictions taking place because we're very, very serious about it. This is why today we have the total number in the Gaza Strip around 13. As you said, Nick, Gaza is 9 persons to a square meter. If we get it out of hand, God help us. And I've been in touch with many, many nations on earth, European Union, United Nations, Japan. This morning I was speaking to their envoy in order to see a coordinated international emergency plan if something goes wrong in Gaza. In the West Bank, we have about 361 or 66 cases so far, 267 cases as a matter of fact, and 2 deaths. And we're coping. We lack a lot of testing kits and equipments and suits and elements, but the European Union 2 days ago provided a package of 71 million euros to Jerusalem hospitals, Gaza, UNRWA. I hope Japan informed me this morning that they're studying this. So the point is, Nick, in the first day, we contacted the Israelis and we told them, look, let's put everything aside. It's not, this is bigger than political differences. This is bigger than race, languages, religions, narratives, stories. This is about our lives. Let us coordinate. And then we formed a coordinating committee. And it really did work for 3 days. Very, very well, because we had to do a lot of coordination together. Then in the 4th day, it's back business as usual. They were back to business as usual. From March 5th to April 5th, Netanyahu's government made 187 incursions. I established a 10th town in the north part of the Jordan Valley as an emergency center for these poor villagers there. They went in and destroyed it. They had more than 267 arrests, killed 3 Palestinians, wounded 47. They demolished 52 homes in this period. And they poured our workers into the entrance of our cities without even notifying us or testing them. And we have also 700 prisoners inside Israeli jails with sick, old people, some with cancer, children, women. We asked for their release, and none of this is happening. And now what Netanyahu is doing, he's taking Corona as something of a cover. Number one, his indictments and court are postponed. Number two, Gantz took his party, blue and white, as he was the captain of the Titanic, and went to Netanyahu's side. And now the discussion in Israel, amidst all of this, is annexation of Palestinian territories. And I have been really in touch with many of my friends in Congress and the Senate. I got a letter yesterday, 2 days ago, from the Israeli Policy Forum, signed by 133 Jewish leaders in the United States opposing this discussion of annexation and annexation. I got more than 25 senators and more than 108 congressmen, American congressmen, opposing this. 222 Israeli retired generals came out with an open letter, CIS, on this. So did all nations on earth. But all the indications now with the corona, we're trying to do everything in our power to confront it and to deal with it and to handle it. And we want to do it with the Israelis because we're in the same street, the same car, the same building. We're not separate entities. Unfortunately, I'll give you an example about Jerusalem, for instance. Jerusalem, we wanna help. We had formed committees from Palestinian Jerusalemites, East Jerusalemites, to distribute food, to do sterilization, sanitization, and to provide help for our hospitals. They arrested the governor. They arrested the minister of Jerusalem. They arrested the Fatah people who were cleaning the streets and giving aid. And then they're not doing anything to help those who have 77 infected people in East Jerusalem. And they're not doing anything. So something must be done about this. I hope that somebody can get to the Israelis and tell them this cannot be done. This cannot be done at this time, because this is an opportunity for us. We're humans, for God's sakes. This is an opportunity for Israelis and Palestinians to stand tall, shoulder to shoulder, to put everything aside. That's what humans should do. That's what people should do. Put everything aside. It's much bigger than any of us. This is the world's closing. This is the worst world. I've been studying pandemics, but never in this what's going on. And the fact is, when I ask my Israeli friends, your behavior, do you know a date when this will be over? Do you have a vaccine for it? Because if you don't have a date when it will be over, and if you don't have a vaccine for it, it's going to go on the hour, every hour, and on the increase, deaths and infections. And we need to get our act together as Palestinians and Israelis. And I hope we can, because without this, especially in Gaza and East Jerusalem and the refugee camps here, and then we have the question of Lebanon and Syria also, the refugee camps there. And we're doing a lot. The Japanese promised me this morning to provide a package for UNRWA. So did the Germans and the French and the British. And I hope that everything can go through directly through UNRWA as far as Gaza and the refugee camps are concerned.
Saeb, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for that report. It's an arresting report, and it's a very sad one that the Israelis and Palestinians can't manage, or the Israeli government can't manage to treat this like the emergency it is in the West Bank and Gaza. I will just say to you, I'm not going to pretend to be objective here. It is appalling to me that the United States cut off aid to UNRWA, which we had supported from the late 1940s, as you know, all the way through to 2 years ago, because that's a lifeline for Palestinians in the West Bank, for those people on this call who maybe haven't been to the territories. Appalling that we've cut off our entire aid program to the Palestinian people, the one that I worked on more than 35 years ago. And we'd had an aid program forever. So I just hope that the United States will also rise to the occasion and decide to help provide humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people in both Gaza and the West Bank. We should do that. I don't hold out much hope for President Trump. I would hope we would do that in these extraordinary circumstances. Just one other note, Libby and I lived across from the St. John Eye Hospital in Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem. And that's the principal hospital for eye surgery and all sorts of eye diseases for all the Palestinians from both Gaza and the West Bank. I received a report from the head of the hospital 2 days ago that the hospital is basically shut down because the Israelis won't let Palestinians travel into East Jerusalem for emergency eye surgery and eye care. And so many, many sympathies to what's happening. Saeb, as you and I agreed, we wanted to talk to you about the Trump or the Kushner plan. I think most people on this Zoom session have read it or read the accounts of it or understand what's in it. I know that Tarek and I both have, Jim and Bob, Megan have a lot of views on this, but we're looking to you to get the Palestinian view. I was just curious, what is your basic view of this? Is there anything that you can work with? And this is an extraordinary plan. It's the first one ever put forward by the United States with, I think, no participation from the Palestinian side that I can see, but let me know if that's not the case. Over to you, Saeb.
Nick, colleagues, I just want to share with you many things that nobody knows about. I will seize this opportunity to tell you that between March 14th, 2017, till 30th of November 2017, I took part of 37 meetings with President Trump and his team. 37. 4 at the level of President Abbas and President Trump, and 33 meetings at my level with Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, and others. We spared no effort, Nick, in order to work with this team. We answered every question. We wrote everything they asked for. I even provided them with minutes and maps of every single era and meeting. As you mentioned, I've been there all the time. And then in November 30th, I was in Washington. I had to stay in Washington for 90 days between September and November. I had to go through a lung transplant. This is why now I'm having a very rigid quarantine, because I'm a person whose immunity is so totally compromised. And Naama, my wife, has really imposed a very draconian law on me. But anyway, may you be healthy. I have an American lung, so I'm good. And the point on 30th of November, I was in the White House, where I was meeting with Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt. And then I asked them, tomorrow is December 1st, the day that we're supposed to sign the waiver for not moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And then Jared told me, no, we're not gonna do it. So I told him, you know what you're talking about? If you don't do it, it's for us, it's gonna be over. And he started shouting, don't threaten me. This is the White House, we're the US. I told him, look, I can't stand guards in your lips and your terminology or anything, but mark my words. If you decide to move the embassy and recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, you would have disqualified yourself from any role in the peace process as Americans. Don't do it. He said, we do things in accordance with our interests and policies. And I asked him to look at my face and told him, look, if you do this, this will be the last Palestinian face you may encounter face to face. I'm serious. So he didn't like what I said. He thought that this was a threat and so on. I told him, look, I have not developed the techniques, as I told you, to stand guards on people's lips, but I'm one of the closest persons to this town and this country, the United States. I've been working for the last, as you said, from the commencement of the peace process in the late 80s, 90s with you. And what you're doing will be a very, very strategic disaster on Palestinians and Israelis. And then that was the last meeting, and that was the last contact. In every single meeting I had with them, Nick, I asked them to set me up with the Israelis. And they said, no, this is not gonna happen. I told them, look, I have no claim on your territory in New Mexico, California, Missouri, and you have no claim in Jericho, Nablus. So please set me up with the Israelis. I need that the only solution for me, for Palestinians and Israelis, is direct bilateral negotiations. That's the truth. Just set me up with them. He said, no, we're not gonna do anything what's done in the past. So they went from 30th of November till the 28th of January 2022 without even contacting us, without even touching us, without even saying anything to us, without nothing. And even, we asked the Europeans if they shared anything with them, the Arabs, the Jordanians, the Saudis, the Egyptians, all their allies, the Russians, the Quartet, and nobody knew anything about it. So it seems to me that Kushner took my job, decided to be the chief Palestinian negotiator, and he said in an interview that I'm a failure, I'm a sequential failure all my life, and that's why he needs to take my job and to do the deal for me, to dictate it on me. And you mentioned something about the aid. They cut $359 million of aid to United Nations Relief and Work Agency. As poor as we are, Nick and colleagues, we cut 5% of our salaries to pay the refugee camps in Syria and Lebanon and other places, because we don't want these thugs and killers and murderers called ISIS to recruit our kids and daughters in these camps. And yet the American administration moves with this big to cut UNRWA's aid. UNRWA is not a Palestinian organization even. And then, the two-state solution is not my position. It's my compromise. It was an American demand on me by the Kissinger conditions of 1974 that the PLO must recognize Israel, accept the two-state solution, accept 242 and 338, renounce violence, and go to negotiations. And we did. And now if I say two states, I become a criminal. So what the deal, what they've done, just to sum it up for you, in December 23rd, 2012, I sat with my colleague, a very decent Israeli person called Itzik Milcho, and he shared with me the vision of Netanyahu, the two of us. Nick, what Jared Kushner introduced on 28th of January 2020 is verbatim. When I took my notes and compared them with it, it was, I don't need to show it to you, but it's there. It's verbatim. The narrative from my hometown Jericho on the River Jordan, now when I'm speaking to you, to the Mediterranean, this is the historical Jewish land. So my narrative, as a son of Jericho, I believe it's 11,000 years old. I believe the Canaanites. I'm not asking anyone to believe in what I believe in, but this is my story. They canceled my narrative, and in the agreement they said overriding security responsibility and sovereignty from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean will be in Israel's hand. Your international passages, territorial water, and airspace will be in Israel's hand, electromagnetic. They will annex the settlements, all the settlements in the West Bank, isolated outposts, blocks, whatever, and they will come annex my constituency to the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea, and I will have no borders with Egypt or Jordan or anyone. And Jerusalem is the eternal, undivided capital of Israel, and Israel is the country of the Jewish people, and the only people who have the right to self-determination are the Jews, with all due respect to Judaism. And then, this is the plan. This is the plan. It was copy and paste of what the Settlers Council want and what the Netanyahu people want. And okay, I mean, if you want to make peace between Palestinians and Israelis, it's not your normal dictation. It's really much more complicated than this. I'm not a military strategic threat to Israel. Israel is not a military strategic threat to me. We are the daily life strategic threat to each other. Okay, you may satisfy what Netanyahu wants, because Friedman, the American ambassador, unfortunately here, said that he was born to do this. He was born to do this. So you're led by a group of ideologues. Friedman was the chief guard of a Beit El settlement. Jason Greenblatt's kids are studying in Gush Atzion settlement in the south of the West Bank. And Kushner is a major donor to the settlement groups. And what I told them once, and what I'm telling them now, for God's sakes, you can't, Judaism to me was never a threat, is not a threat, will never be a threat. Judaism is one of God's great religion, like it's Christianity and Islam. Our conflict is not a religious one. Our conflict is a political one. It's about borders, territory, nationalism. Let's confine it to this. What you're doing with this so-called plan is you're turning into a religious conflict. You are destroying Arab moderates. you're destroying Arab who believe in human rights, democracy, women's rights, the rule of law, peace, negotiations, void of violence. You're strengthening those extremists in the Arab world who go to mosques not to worship God, but to use God. And that's the plan. It's the worst thing that happened between Palestinians and Israelis since the inception of this conflict. Now, if they move to annex partially or comprehensively, the first victims will be the Palestinian Authority. We will be destroyed. The point here, I think Netanyahu aims at destroying the Palestinian Authority, or change its position, or it accepts to change its function or job. I was born as a Palestinian Authority to transfer Palestinians peacefully from occupation to independence and to live side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel. We agreed on the concept, we agreed swaps, we agreed on demilitarized, we agreed on many security arrangements, we agreed on many other things. We agreed that East Jerusalem will be capital of Palestine, West Jerusalem capital of Israel. But then why should we divide the city? We said to them, we can run it the day after, peace. And all these parameters were done with Israeli prime ministers. We did not waste our time in these years. We've come a long way. We exchanged maps. And but these people are determined to impose and dictate this solution. And if we don't accept it, we are, $844 million we're slashed. Now at this crisis, I know that some senators, Senator Patrick Leahy, Senator Chris Van Hollen, Dianne Feinstein, and Congressman Peter Welch, Andy Levine, and many of them are close friends of mine, wrote and told them, just help through USAID, help through ANERA, help through Save the Children, help through UNRWA. Don't leave them like this. And deaf ears. You could wake up one morning and find all Palestinians are being mass buried. That doesn't matter. And then yesterday, even the World Health Organization that helps us with some things, President Trump decides to cut the aid to the American aid to World Health Organization. And what we see in all of this, about the American administration, but I don't want to poke my nose into it, but they're poking their nose and their eyes and their ears and their lips in my personal life. And all I hear from them after all what they do in this region, okay, after all what they do in life that complicated everything in this region that was already complicated, is that nobody does it better than Trump. Nobody does it better than Kushner. Nobody plays soccer better than them. Nobody plays football. Nobody walks. Nobody eats. Nobody drinks. Nobody do nothing. Everything for them is the best on earth. Where do they get this mentality of having this hallucination? I don't know. Theodore Roosevelt once said, "The White House is an office of international morality," and I couldn't agree more. This White House needs giant statesmen, not real estate agents. That's the honest truth. Let's face it. Because I'm really doing a study now on the international relations during and after the day after the pandemic. And this is a very, very complicated matter, because as a Palestinian, I'm worried. I'm doing my best during. I may be able to limit the numbers unless the vaccine is found, but the day after, with the annexation, is non-existence for Palestinian who want peace and who want moderate and who want this. This is why this is not only a deal breaker. This means that this administration will find allies in this region who are the most authoritarian, draconian, anyone who doesn't want to violate, because in the recovery period, in anywhere, it's going to be very difficult, especially in the Arab world. I think the allies will be those who have stood a long time against human rights, women's rights, the rule of law, democracy. And people like us, Nick, may not be able to speak to you in the day after Corona because of the policies of the Trump administration.
Saeb, thank you. Thank you very, very much. I was remiss in not telling everyone that Saeb agreed before we joined you that he is on the record. So he may be quoted, but I think it's important that we don't want to quote students here. We want students to feel they can speak up and not be quoted. So there's one person on the record, that's Saeb. And thank you for speaking so forthrightly. In a better world, if the coronavirus had not hit the world, Saeb was to have been with us on campus last week as a Fisher Fellow. We're very hopeful that if we can return to school in the autumn, and we don't know if we can yet, that Saeb will come in person to the Kennedy School this autumn to spend time with our students and with our professors.